and it'll start playing like embedded, like right in here. Now you don't get all the interaction that you do if you go to the real Hangout. And it seemed like the delay was bigger to this YouTube feed, but then it's just on YouTube and it's there.
Yeah, and it's got at least loaded, right?
Yeah, right. But let's see, the first day I forgot to screen share, and then I forgot to unmute it last time. So. You were on there too, live, or did you watch it later?
I watched it live.
Okay.
As I walked up, so I got there right as the last started, and I busted into the box. I didn't mention this.
Okay, got the endless
Hey,
going on there.
It's actually really
Yeah, so right here, it's playing live in here, this screen. It's that far behind, but if you view it here, it should be, or in the actual Hangout, it should be not that far behind. But if you view it here, okay. So,
Did you upload that font?
that's right. No? Let's just do this again. Link, browse repositories, choose file, upload this file. I end up doing a lot of direct HTML editing inside the editor because then I can make it do what I want. Right. Okay. I'm going to save it and display it now and see if it works. Okay. That worked on mine. I'm not gonna rename it. Okay, so let's just start. For no one view. I just want to keep track. If people are on there, I want to like try to engage with them. If we're just recording static, then it doesn't really matter as much that I keep track of that. So we're going to do chapter 3 today, chapter 4 Thursday. So that gets us a teeny bit ahead of like the last year's schedule on the syllabus. I'm going to try to, like I said before, they didn't really start the project at all until further in. I'm going to start trying to trickle that out maybe next week so we can get it jumped. Like, once we get through these first 4 chapters, I think we have a lot of tools to start moving forward with the planning part of it. So, I never mentioned this last week, which was kind of, I meant to. Homework 1 is due this Saturday at midnight. It's been there, it was there all last week. And this assignment, and trying to do 2 meetings, but it's just like looking in the book and answering questions. And that feels like kind of like a high school assignment, but how else to reinforce these things? So
I ordered my book. It's supposed to be here Friday. Do you have a copy?
The first 3.
Oh, the chapters.
First 3 chapters are right here. And then
PDF of that.
if you Google the name of the textbook, you can find the entire book on it. I can't post it without.
Okay, so I should have done that.
Yeah,
I still like the physical book and no one outline.
I do too.
you can send it back. Yeah, the PDF's floating around online. The 5th edition, because this isn't the newest edition. There's a 6th. So a lot of times then they stop enforcing the those are out there. But they're still charging full price for the 5th edition books, which is kind of crazy.
That's years.
Yeah. So let's see here. So,
We used to book a couple years ago, and it was like the 3rd edition, and it's on like the 8th, 9th edition now. And it's, you can still get the 3rd and 4th edition. It's still the same price.
oh, jeez.
And it's like,
I hear that beeping. Is that me or is that someone else? The hangout sound. Do you hear that, right?
is there a chat? It's like someone's not like typing the question.
Yeah.
You want it like, if you put like 1 file.
One file's fine. I don't know where that beeping is. So I was gonna ask last time. I'm always like toying with my PowerPoints. I took a theme and modified it. It's like really plain black and white, but I kind of like it. It's look all right to you guys. I think it's probably easier for the encoding into YouTube when it's simple. So it just has a black line down below that. But, so homework 1, that's Saturday at almost midnight. So just submit that on. So just chapter 2 summary from last week. Just remember what we talked about. We talked about outsourcing, some of the advantages, and of course, I think we can all relate to the disadvantages. The 6 different sources of software. Let's see if we can remember these. So 1 was off the shelf. 1 was cloud. In-house development. Outside IT. There was a name for it. Software firm or something like to develop it for you. ERP. The categories to me there's kind of a lot of overlap. Open source was number 6. Open source, yeah. So, I mean, again, most of us as kind of like software people, we sort of know about this. But, we had a little discussion about evaluating off the shelf and whether it meets the needs, and then reuse. The idea of if you're going to purchase software or create your own or have someone create it for you, the better, the more modular it is, the more chance you can reuse it, which is like fundamental to the software design process. So, like I said, software engineering, this project management, they're like at a different scope, but there's a ton of similarity between them. So chapter 3, we're going to just talk a little bit about project management, kind of what that entails. What does a project management or project manager do? And over the course of a project, there's these 4 steps: initiation, planning, execution, and close down. So every project, whether it's development or implementation of some off-the-shelf software, existing solutions, it's going to kind of go through these steps. Critical path scheduling. So this is the Gantt charts I talked about, which is what's closely related to the Gantt charts. So we'll talk about Gantt charts, network diagrams, and then kind of how the critical path fits into that. And then review commercial project management software packages. So I posted links to Moodle of 4 cloud-based project management. I think in today's day and age, I don't see a reason why you would install, set up a server, and fire up an off-the-shelf project management software. I mean, I'm sure there's cases, I'm sure lots of businesses do, but I think in today's day and age, the cloud stuff is much better. Then it's just installed on the machines, everyone can get at it anywhere, like, much nicer. So I did 4 examples. I've started evaluating them. I will choose one of those that we'll use to plan our projects for class. And we'll look at them a little bit. So, just to start, it's going to come up several times in these slides, just to have an example of something we're doing. We're going to look at this Pine Valley Furniture. The chapter talks about this too. So the idea is it's a manufacturing company, obviously making furniture, wood furniture, selling to the United States. They do manufacturing and then sales is kind of the obvious path there. So, and this would be typical of what you'd see in a business. They had 3 computer systems, probably to store management information, sales, leads, and contacts, and then I don't know what the third is, but like we talked about, you still see remnants of it where they have these old school systems. Chances are they don't talk very well with other systems that dated. So at some point in the 90s, that was converted to a database. So depending on the scope of the business, maybe an access database would be pretty likely for this kind of a scenario. We're assuming this is a smaller kind of company.
And the book scenario is fire the server.
Yeah, it's an SQL thing. So it'd be based on the size. I mean, and like I said to those of you with database, like Access is a personal database. It's really meant to be used by like one person, but a lot of places misuse how it's. So, okay, this makes sense. I totally blanked on the last slide. So the 3 different applications that they had: orders for furniture, invoicing, and then the payroll system. So orders has these 3 programs feeding into, I mean, a system is kind of the procedures they're going through. And then they've got these files feeding into it. So kind of the different departments and how they interact. Have orders, accounting, payroll. Accounting and payroll are not that far apart from each other, but a lot of businesses separate the accounting of outside accounting versus internal accounting. The internal accounting is the payroll. So we'll come back to that as we go through here. So focus of product management. So to ensure that information systems projects meet customer expectations. You hope this would be obvious, but a lot of other agendas often come in. If you want to be a good project manager or a good IT firm or any of these things, you should always be focused on your customers. But deadlines and internal struggle, all sorts of things go on that cause that to be kind of lost. Then your clients are unhappy. But the focus of project management isn't on managing the project. That's kind of the point here. It is managing the project, but to achieve the goal of meeting your customer expectations. So you want to deliver the project in a timely manner. You want to meet the requirements of that project. I may have drawn this in databases, and this won't show up on the Hangout because I'm drawing on the board, but you a lot of times see this portrayed in a triangle. So you have time. You have like staff. This is for the project management side. You have staff slash budget, because really the budget determines the staff, right? How much you're going to spend. And then the requirements or features. Now the idea with the triangle is that you can't modify one side without really affecting the others. So if you want it in less time, something's going to have to give here, or you're going to have to put additional budget to So there's kind of an interrelation between these on projects. If you want more features, you're either going to need more time or you're going to need more people to work on it. So you, as a project manager or anyone that works in software, you're going to be continually asked to deliver more features in less time for less money. And it's not really possible. There's only so many hours in a day. So again, that seems like common sense, but you'd be shocked with the expectations. Any of you that have worked in IT or those kind of things, people don't have a good grasp of the time required to accomplish tasks at all. No, you can't just re-image this lab randomly, you know, at the end of the day. You know, things like that. So, no, it just doesn't work. This doesn't happen. So, the project manager, so kind of, it's going to be a systems analyst. So we're kind of saying this is the upper system analyst that's serving as the manager. They're going to be responsible for initiating the project, planning. This is budgeting of dollars and time, and how you're allocating resources. Execution. So once you're in the process of doing the project, coordinating all of those items, and then closing down. So ending the project. Every project will have a logical end. We'll look at closing down in a later slide. We'll look at all of these, kind of what's part of those. So to be a project manager, of course, it's a more diverse set of skills. So management is pretty obvious as part of that. Leadership, technical, conflict management, customer relations. So what often happens, you can probably draw a similar triangle over about this item. You pick a project manager, and it's hard to find someone that has all of those. That is both technically savvy and deals well with people and is a good leader. You'd hope you can find people like that, but you often can't. So it comes down to, you pick a great leader who's really good with people and working with the clients, but doesn't know anything about how the development, how that project works. That's really risky because they often over-promise what can happen. If you pick someone more technical and they're always at odds with the clients, because, you know, this is, I'm stereotyping, of course. It's not everybody's that way, but it's hard to find someone that can fill all of those. So you can kind of, it would be a pentagon that you draw here, how those sides interrelate to each other. I think the technical one is very important and oftentimes neglected. I think they put a lot of people in management positions because of those other skills, and those are what show up the most obvious. But if they don't have at least some technical idea, you end up in some trouble. So, all right. So, project manager juggles numerous activities. Again, kind of a silly image, but customer management and expectations, that's probably the most difficult one on here. Balancing between your boss telling you one thing, your customer telling you another for what you want to develop. I mean, I dealt with this a lot in the company, more of a shift. Time and resource constraints are pretty obvious. Technological change, you know, that's a big challenge of always trying to stay current. Just a lot of things to juggle. So project management process, so digging in a little bit more. So we give a definition here to project. So a plan undertaking related activities to reach an objective that has a beginning and end. So this might be developing, like I said, developing custom software, actually coding it out. It might just be implementing an off-the-shelf software and kind of the procedures that go with it. So hopefully the idea with a project is that it's related activities. Oftentimes projects the scope creeps, where all of a sudden the project contains things that maybe don't really belong together and aren't that closely related. So that feature creep, call that. Something else I was going to say. Oh, kind of in this idea of dealing with customers and as a project manager. One of my professors taught me, and I have said this phrase probably 1,000 times, to under-promise and over-deliver. It's very easy to promise things that you can't do. If you under-promise, but then you come through with a little extra, you're the hero. If you over-promise, though, and then you come up short, then they think, yeah, you look like an idiot. So be very careful about what you promise. Try to keep that close. And then if maybe you take some of the feedback of what they want, but you don't say, oh yeah, we can do that. You say, I'll jot that down and kind of manage that. But then if you can come through with it, I mean, that happened in the company. I mean, we definitely overpromised over and over again. Like as a new company, that's kind of what you do, trying to get clients and stuff. That killed us. But there was times where people asked for stuff and we said, no, that probably won't happen. And then it comes down to development. It's way easier than you thought it was. You kind of include it as you're doing something else. And then once you tell them, I mean, yeah, you've got that client for a long time. And they think you're pretty great. So 4 phases of a project, and these were on that first slide. So initiating it, planning the project out, executing it, and then closing down. So most people, of course, focus on that executing, right? And neglect, especially planning. Closing down a project, I can't say that I've ever been part of closing down a software project. They've all continued to go after I wasn't involved with them, so I haven't lived that part. I've definitely done the other ones in many different initiations. So again, software project is one subset of an example of this project management, but same ideas. So initiating the project, so putting together a team of who's gonna help kick things off. And then this is the big one, establishing a relationship with the customer. If you want to get good feedback and get good information to help your planning, you have to spend some time here. You can never guess or think you know what the customer wants without verifying, because you're just going to waste time and no one's going to end up happy. So as part of this team, you want people that are good at listening. I just sat through a meeting at the high school, which is like the exact opposite of good relations, where everyone's just, I don't know why, like mad at each other over nothing, over what computers we're going to purchase for the school. And I went to all these meetings. I'm on the district-wide hardware committee for devices and the school-wide. I went to all these meetings at the district-wide, and then I report back what they told us. And then everyone is mad at me, even though it has nothing to do with me, and then basically tells me, we don't believe you, we're going to bring in the head guy to tell us what I know to be true. So, I guess I'm venting, but. Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah. And then, I guess, my dad calls this an I know man. Don't have an I know man on your team interacting with people, because anytime you try to tell them how to do something, they say, I know, and they don't listen, and they just think they can do it better. Than that's super annoying and accomplishes nothing. And there's a lot of people out there that just they think they know it all. Establish the project initiation plans. These are pretty simple. Establish management procedures, and this can go a long way. Clearly defined roles. You know, who is doing what their relation, what's that hierarchy? And, you know, you hear a lot about, you know, you kind of want to avoid some of that and kind of be collaborative. Yes, but ultimately someone has to, when the rubber meets the road, someone has to make these decisions. And if you don't have that, you just circle endlessly over and over and nothing ever gets decided. So at some point, somebody has to be running the show. And then establish the project management environment and workbook. So this is just setting up, like, how are we going to run this project? What softwares are we going to use to manage it, making sure everyone. Now, some of the book's process here is definitely focusing on a really traditional project kind of phase with a lot of these formal procedures and stuff. That still exists a ton. Like I said, we'll talk a lot about Agile, which is a little, almost a reaction back against some of that to be more nimble. But even within those kind of more nimble processes, you still need to do these same things, just maybe at a little less formal level. So we'll look at a project management software called Basecamp. Let's see if we've heard of Basecamp. So Basecamp came out, it's been out a while now, probably 10 years or close to that. It was the big kind of disruption to how project management does. So I think Clayton Christensen, there's a book about disruptive technology. Looks just like how did I jump like 20 slides forward? That's weird. I've done that before. The idea with disruptive technologies or disruptive software is you have the kind of giants that exist, and then something comes along that's usually going to be way simpler and way easier to use and kind of upends the industry. Like Google Docs was kind of listed as that. If Office is the giant that everybody uses, and then Google Docs, think about it when it came out, not what it is now, because now it's gets bigger and bigger, right? But for a lot of people, it became, we don't need Office because for their basic needs, Google Docs could do it. Now, what they projected to happen with that, I don't think came to fruition. Everyone still uses Office too, you know, and Docs maybe more of a supplement, and now Office is online. So, but sometimes these disruptive technologies can like topple whole industries because it just goes against the way things were traditionally done. Well, Basecamp is always cited as one of these softwares that came along and said, hey, like the traditional ways of managing a project are way too, they're overkill for what most things need. Here's a simpler way to do it. And they've been tremendously successful. They basically invented the whole Ruby on Rails programming environment as part of their company. So their company's 37 Signals. But anyway, a lot of these are they thinking of a bigger, more traditional process. I guess I'm just pointing out the scale and the scope of these. So the project charter, so that's just kind of laying out formally this information about the charter or about the project. Charters, information about the charter would make no sense. So planning the project, again, we're digging deeper. So what's the project scope? What are some alternatives and feasibility? It's always nice to do a scope and feasibility. What's the size of this? What's the expense? What's the time? All of those, how many people is it going to take and staff it? And then is that feasible? Because if you cannot enter an agreement with your client or your customer about something that is feasible for both sides, then don't move forward. Don't assume it's just going to work itself out. Now, of course, this requires understanding the project, which goes back to that relationship with the customer. They may have completely different ideas than what you have about scope, feasibility, and what the project actually is, what it includes, what it doesn't include. What problem is to be addressed? So as you start thinking about some kind of project you're going to work on here, thinking of a problem, and I always say this, like I was told by one of the top Sequoia Capital, who was one of the first investors, Google, they're one of their top guys. I met him and got to talk to him. His big thing was in software, identify a problem, come up with something to solve it. Without the problem, you're not doing anything. You're wasting your time. So this goes for these kind of projects as well. So make sure you clearly understand, why are we here? What are we doing? What's the ultimate thing we're trying to fix? So as far as your guys' project, and again, I said it before, I'll be a little loose with that. It doesn't have to be quite as specific, but there should be a reason you're doing it. And then what results? So that's closely related. There's a problem. What are the results? Orbital shift, we weren't developing for a client, even if we had. Scheduling's a problem. The results are how we want that to be easier, the kind of communication we want to allow. And then measurements of success. So these, again, this is, if you're a three-man outfit, you're probably not going to formalize these quite to this level. I mean, maybe for orbital shift in the business, we had some measurements of success, but we weren't putting benchmarks to, well, the software's successful if it saves a person 10% of their time. But a bigger project, you would certainly put those in. That's how you can work with your customer, your client, to come up with some kind of metrics. So after implementation, you can say, yeah, we met what you were looking for. There was a 10% time reduction in teller to customer interaction, like a metric to that. And those are things that can be quantifiable are the best. If it's just like our customers are more happy with our service, how do you quantify that, right? Maybe you can do some surveys, but if you've ever done SMART goal planning, you guys ever done that? Where, they make us do it as teachers. What are our goals for the year? But it has to be measurable. Like if you can't measure it, so I'm going to do this procedure in my classroom, and it's going to result in this many fewer referrals to detention because, so it has to be a measurable thing. And then completion criteria. So when is this? What means this is done? Are you implementing it and you're out the door? Are you staying behind to service and support this project? What's the expected lifespan of it? If you're staying to support it, it's not, well, we're just going to hang on to this for dear life for 20 years. The expected lifespan of this software and to what level we're going to provide support. Microsoft is very clear with these. The completion of the operating system, when they're going to stop developing it more, and then when they're going to stop supporting it, that's laid out. So otherwise, it just kind of gets dragged on forever. So dividing the project into manageable tasks. So this is, and we'll talk about the tools to track this in a minute, but it's much harder to quantify the length of time and resources. Just, here's a project. You can break it down. We need to do this. We need to install these computer systems. We need to install these pieces of software. It's, the further you can break it down, the more easy it is to estimate. Humans tend to be very poor estimators. It's kind of proven over and over again. We're not very good at it. And me personally, I'm always over optimistic. I think I can do way more than I actually can do. goes for software. I used to do drywall, taping, and texturing and painting for ever and ever with my dad. And he'd be at work on a Saturday, and it'd be 10 o'clock, and he'd be like, well, we got to get this much done. And well, we could probably get out of here in like 4 hours. And we never, ever did, you know, so.
7.5 hours.
Yeah, you'd think I would have learned my lesson, but I still do it. I make a list for Saturday, and I get half of it done, you know, and then I feel like I failed. If I'd have come up with something more reasonable, I could end the day, you know, feeling better. So, I mean, the smaller the task, of course, it's easier to estimate. Work breakdown structure. So this is just kind of part of breaking it into tasks. Who's going to do what work? And the Gantt chart comes into this. What are the pieces? How do they connect? What's the path? This is Microsoft Project is the one I've done this the most in. We'll look at the cloud ones. Now, some of the cloud ones I put up don't have Gantt charts because to some of these people, Gantt charts are considered old school, dated. You know, we don't use Gantt charts anymore. We use the whole to-do list, notes on a board. That's a pretty common kind of system. I put Trello on there. That uses a Kanban system. You guys familiar with Kanban? The Toyota invented this in the 80s. This is why the Japanese, their manufacturing procedures were way ahead, and their cars were way better. I don't know, throughout the late 80s and 90s, all the way through the 90s. I think American car companies have caught up, but it's because they basically copied the Japanese way of doing this. But Toyota, it's like the owner, or the CEO or something, invented this Kanban process for prioritizing tasks, and that's what Trello is designed on. But it's a different way to go about it than Gantt chart. Going for the same goal, of course. So estimate resources and create a resource plan. So what are your man hours? What are your dollars? What are you going to hire any contractors to assist? And this feeds right into the Gantt chart. And, at one point in software engineering, I had a tool that actually one of my professors had developed where you would enter all these things, parameters, and it would estimate the dollars. You'd have estimations. If you need to develop for a year, a developer, this was 10 years ago, was $100,000 when you included equipment, salary, everything else, and then you could expect this many lines of code out of a developer. And this system had, like, if you buy them a faster computer, their productivity goes up this much, like all these kind of inputs. So
you account for better, stronger coffee.
yeah, I don't remember that being in there, but you know, now we've sort of hit a stasis point on computer speed. I mean, they get faster, but for software development, if you're not doing like video rendering or AutoCAD and that kind of stuff, I mean, this thing's fast enough. It's not like I'm waiting for it unless you have an SSD. But back then, it made a big difference. 10 years ago, if you spent $3,000 and got someone on a workstation, and you think about every second you're saving them from waiting every day for a year, it's a ton of time. So anyway, what resources do we have? And then you're going to develop this preliminary schedule. So this is where the Gantt chart really comes into play, because every task you're putting in basically a timeline. This will take this long. You can't start this until this is done. This will take this long, and it builds out, and then you have your schedule. And then, of course, you build the schedule, and it's like 3 months too long. You start to see, what can I do to shorten some of these? Can we bring in more people? How are we going to shift that triangle to meet what our customer expectations are? So that's what the Gantt chart comes in. Communication plan. So outline communication processes among customers, team members, and management. This is critical. As you work with customers, certain people will get relationships. You know, maybe they're it just naturally happens, and then you end up having someone at the bank, a teller giving feedback to someone else, and then they're like, oh yeah, I'll develop that, but it hasn't gone through the proper channels of who has to approve these and what's the flow of that information. And it happens all the time. You have salesmen out there making certain promises without even asking the developers if that's possible. They want to make the sale, right? So how these communications and what it flows, ideally you have some software to track all of these interactions, right? So anytime anyone interacts with the customer, that's recorded. Yeah, right. Exactly. And again, a lot of these things are just neglected or not even thought about because it's like, who would think of a communication plan, but in a big project, these things are great. I mean, orbital shift, I would, it was a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 person company over the years I worked there. It's small, but wish we'd have had some of these things because our scheduling process always failed greatly. And I had to bear the brunt of it always from my business partner that, well, you said you would do this and you failed, so that's your fault for why we're here. Even though I would get badgered into saying I would do stuff that I knew couldn't happen, so I just don't get in those situations. So types of reports and their distribution. So your customer's going to want feedback. They don't want to just sit for a year, wait for you to come back, be done with it. They want to know where you're at and are you ahead of schedule, are you behind schedule, and again, under promise, over deliver on that. But what kind of information are you going to report to the customer? You're not going to tell them everything, but they're going to have certain expectations, and you're going to have certain expectations. Make sure that's defined up front. Yeah, right. And then the distribution. Who's getting these? These aren't just email blasts to everybody that works at your customer's place of business. Again, what's the flow of that information? So, and then how often? And just there's a fine line between over detail on these, but it almost gets into this kind of legal thing. If it's not clearly outlined, then it just becomes a battle between the two sides of who's right. Oh, you said we got this report every week. No, we're not giving you that, If it's laid out, then say, right here in our plan, that was agreed to, here's what it is. Right. So this little table is just listing team communication methods. And again, the bigger the team, some of these projects you might have people working in 3 cities on. That's different than 5 people in an office. How formal do they need to be? And again, this whole process is very formal, really, compared to anything I've worked on. Well, I worked on a NASA project. It was like this, but most of the other ones I've worked on weren't quite the same. So the project workbook would be a high formality permanent record. Meetings are medium high. That's to resolve issues. Seminars, blah, blah, blah. These range from bulletin boards, which are obviously low. Hallway discussions are low formality, but they all have their own purpose. Brown bag lunches, basically a way of making people work during their lunch and act like it's some kind of benefit, right? That's what those are. Yeah. Well, and you guys work in, well, I mean, you don't right now, but you guys are kind of software, you work at a bank. Being a teacher now is so different. Like, I always stayed late and came in early. Teachers, their contract day is 7:40 to 3:40, and they will not commit to anything outside of that 3:40. Some will because they want to be good teachers, but a lot of them, they won't. I mean,
That usually doesn't last very long.
That's the end. And if they're outside of that, they want something. They want they want extra credits to renew their certificate in the state. They want curriculum pay, so it's.
I've had teachers that knew and they'll say after a couple hours how, and then after they've worked there for about 3-4 years, they'll do it.
Yeah, that's time over. So these things like brown bag lunches and a ton of these would just be expectations of working in most places. But if you work in a unionized place, it's weird to me how I would look at that stuff. So. I like that. Yeah, because that's what a lot of people do. They just commit to everything because they're like, oh, I probably should do this. And then they just complain all the time. So, yeah. I mean, I'm so used to working 60 hours a week, I don't really have a problem doing extra stuff for school. So determine project standards and procedures. I mean, these are just step by step. Specify how deliverables are tested and produced. So just formalizing that process. What are you going to deliver? Who's going to test it? Hopefully you get your clients testing it early and often if possible. That's the more agile method. After you develop for 3 years, then they see it. It's like, wait a second, this is not what we wanted. Risk. So identifying risk is pretty important. Usually you'll list these out. Like, what are the potential things that could derail this? Any software development process, you should probably just list feature creep right away because that's almost always a source of risk. Is you try to add more, your customer wants more, and it just gets bigger. Scope grows. But there's tons of risk. A risk can actually be that a key team member leaves, dies, whatever, but that makes a big difference. When I decided to leave Orbital Shift, that almost ended the company. Same thing would go for some of these big projects. If your lead developer decides to leave in the middle, that's a risk. So what are your contingencies in to prevent that? Make sure someone doesn't walk out with all the knowledge. Estimate the consequence of the risk. So these are kind of obvious. Write a preliminary budget. So hopefully you've broken the task down and you've come up with something you can put a dollar figure to this. It's really hard. And I painted houses, exteriors of houses one summer. We got asked to do a bunch of them, and we had never done it for our drywall business. And my brother and I were like, yeah, we'll do it. We go to a house, and the guy's like, asks us how much it's going to cost, and I look at it, and I go, I'm $1,500. No idea. Basically, like, underbid it by about 3 times. Second one I did, same thing. I underbid it. And then finally, I was so frustrated with making no money that the next one, I thought what it was, and I doubled it and made that bid, and they took it, and they loved it. So it's a fine line here of not underdoing it, and then you're stuck in a 1-year project where you're just going to take a big loss, but you don't want to throw out some huge price that they're going to say no to. So as you build it's really the timelines are what's going to drive most of the budget. Most of these projects, biggest variable is man hours, and people cost a lot. The school district, they're always talking about cutting costs and stuff, and like that bond came through and people were up in arms and stuff, but it's like 90-some% of the budget is employee salaries as teachers, because it costs a lot, so how that gets laid out. there's a lot of steps to planning. So this emphasizes again, like the importance of this. And I'm not going to make you do all of this. And if I make you do some of these, they may be very brief. But develop a project scope statement. So this is just trying to compare it to something that I just did. If you have this big plan and you have all these specific details, this is sort of like the one line or the statement, like your mission statement of your business. This is sort of like that before your project plan. We're going to deliver this on this timeline. It's simple, something you can portray. Something that if someone doesn't want to read this whole huge thing, they can still get the general idea. Baseline project plan. So, I mean, we're just furthering these pieces. Estimate the tasks and resources. The Gantt charts do make this process pretty nice. I'm trying to think. I'm not sure I've ever worked on. I've done a lot of Gantt charts, but I think it's more for class than practical use. Most of mine has been more the agile methods. But the Gantt charts, if you can come up with the good estimates, the way they lay out, I actually think probably they've been helpful in order to shift with making sure some of these things didn't drag on. Okay, so that was the biggest one of these 4 parts: planning, executing, closing the project, initiating. We already talked about that. Initiating is the first. That was planning. That kind of has the most steps because they're trying to emphasize it's really important. Everyone wants to get going, get running on stuff, but without that plan in place, you're in for trouble. So basically, you had a project plan. Now you're going to execute it. You're going to assign resources based on what that plan was. You're going to train up new team members if you need. Maybe they need new skills. Maybe they just need domain knowledge of what the project is and who you're dealing with. Keep project on schedule. So again, we're looking at this from the project manager perspective. So again, there's a fine line here between keeping it on schedule and really pissing your employees off. So that's why I don't work for Orbital Shift anymore. So monitoring progress. So making any adjustments as you go. So we had this plan. How close are we to it? What do I need to shift? Do I need to move some people to a different task because that's holding things up? Do I need to beg someone for more money to make some changes? So basically, you're monitoring so you can manage these changes. So slipped completion dates, that's always going to be the biggie. Bungled activity that must be redone. So you mess something up totally, you have to start over. It'll happen in anything of scope. I went down some rabbit holes with our software thinking that was a good way to go, and then ended up canning and jumping back to where I was before. So it sucks, it's wasted time, but it's this idea of a sunk cost. That's what a sunk cost is. So, I mean, you can never say, well, we already spent this much time and money on it. We got to keep going with it. That money is sunk. You're never getting it back. So if the best decision is to leave it, but again, that is even a harder thing for the human mind to deal with. We really cling on to what we've done and especially what we've spent. But those sunk costs, you gotta draw that line and separate yourself from your attachment to those things.
I just doubled down. It's very hard to like that because I got what next day I spent $440 on that list.
Yeah, it's so easy to get drugged down those paths. In all sorts of things, you get attached to a car that you should get rid of, but you just keep sinking money into it. It's like, well, I spent this much money on it, so that stuff's reliable. And,
I got one of those too.
yeah, I've got two of them. It's changes in personnel. So this, if someone does leave, what do you do about it? New activities. And then you're going to maintain the project workbook. So you're going to kind of manage all these artifacts as you go through. Hopefully you have someone helping you. You're not doing all of it. Hopefully you have a secretary if you're a project manager at anything of scope. But I think the reality is a lot of us are going to, especially if you stay anywhere in Montana, you're going to work for something smaller and you're probably going to end up doing a lot of things that if you worked for Microsoft, you obviously wouldn't do, right? So, I mean, even the bank, how many bank branches are there?
Or I bet that was two of us that were in the last 10 years.
Three.
But we were long lots.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you'd think the bank would be big enough, but even that's small enough that, yeah, right. That'll make it easier for you. I mean, you start a software company like me and you do everything except sales, basically. I ran the servers, I answered the support phone lines, which ultimately is what tipped me over the edge because I hated it so much. Communicate project status, so back to your client. And again, you want to be honest so you don't just dig a bigger hole. Like if you're behind a little bit and you just keep lying and lying and then all of a sudden you're 5 months behind, 6 months behind, there's a real tipping point there where you'd have been better off saying, well, we're a little behind, and tell them much earlier. And here's what we're trying to do about it and how we're going to improve it. People are real hesitant to do that. And then, yeah, right. Wait till the very last minute. Okay, then the last thing, closing down the project. So terminating it. There's two types. Natural, the requirements have been met, everything's done, it served its purpose, it's over. The unnatural, the project was stopped for some reason. So your client went out of business, they found a better deal with someone else, and decided to consider your project a sunk cost and end it. Lots of reasons, unnatural reasons. Now, the requirements have been met, like, for a company like Orbital Shift, that software just goes on forever, right? Until like that website is taken down. A lot of projects now don't have the finite end in software that they used to. Like now Windows 10, they're saying it's just gonna go on forever, and they're just gonna keep updating it. Whereas like all the other versions of Windows had a natural end. They served their life cycle, they were developed, run a skeleton crew to handle the critical updates, and then you provide support, and then it's over. With online stuff, this has changed a lot. Now you may have certain, even within one website, eventually they always get redeveloped in a new technology, but to do the same thing. Maybe that kind of ends, but the project sort of keeps going. So you're going to see the unnatural. Someone goes out of business. Documentation, personnel appraisal. So documentation of kind of the whole scope of the project. Who worked on the project, what was good, what was bad, who's getting fired, who's getting promoted. Post-project reviews. So kind of look at how good is what we delivered, how I always thought we'd get better at Orbital Shift about budgeting time. Our project was one project, but we'd have sub things, like we're going to do this feature, and I'd estimate it, and we failed greatly. Usually it's because I got asked to do, I'd say I could do this in 2 months, and during the course of 2 months, I'd have to fix 100 bugs and do 2 other features, and then it would take 4 months, but it would be my fault, But So it was hard to get realistic comparisons. If I estimated this, here's how long it took. I got to a point where I wanted to start tracking time. This is what you should do when you're actually working on that. So you can say, well, yeah, I thought I was going to work on this 50 hours a week, and I worked on it 10 hours this week, and I actually did start tracking that. Never really got the chance to use that to protect myself. Project management process. So what was good? Communication between the clients. What softwares do we use to manage the project? What sucked about them? What we liked. The development process. And then the final step here is closing customer contract. So formally ending that. Hopefully as part of that post-project reviews, you can do some of that with your client in addition to just internal. It's always a good idea. So we talked about the initiation, the planning, the execution, the closing. That's kind of the cycle of a project. Now we'll just we'll look at a little bit of these Gantt charts. So Gantt charts are useful for depicting simple projects or parts of larger projects. You wouldn't develop Microsoft Windows and make a Gantt chart of it. It's too much. You take components. There's the add remove programs, or you dissect it down, and then you just have multiple Gantt charts that together would represent your whole thing. So they show start and completion dates for individual tasks. It looks like a timeline. And of course, this is where I said breaking down the tasks. You don't want to go too small, but you do want to go reasonably small. When we talk more about Agile, you do sprints. So you say, well, you kind of start with the user story. As a user, I want to be able to do this. Then you take that idea. So as a user, I want to be able to create an event saying I can't work that day. And then you make a sprint task list, which you break that down. Every step you're going to have to do that. And then you kind of design these sprints. Agile is like taking this idea and making it small. In 2 weeks or a week, what can we do in one sprint? You can take that same idea to software development into a bigger project as well. So you don't break it too far, but you break it far enough. So similar to a Gantt chart. Let's see. Networking diagrams. So this shows the order of the activities. So the Gantt chart is more for showing the time. Network diagrams. I see that and I think of, here's the cables to the routers and the computers. That's not what it is. I wasn't really too familiar with this idea. Or a neural network is the other thing I think of. So the top is the Gantt chart. This image is horribly squished. This is straight out of Microsoft Project. Project might be on these computers. They are. So we can pull it up in a second. So here you have a task, requirements collection. You say how many weeks? 5 weeks. We're going to start on the 9th or the 4th of May, 2009. We're going to end on the 5th of June. And it's going to take this long. This feeds into screen design and report design. But these can occur concurrently. We can start designing the screens and the reports at the same time. We have to have requirements, but these can go on concurrently. Then we have to have both of these to design the database. We need to know what's going to go in the reports and what's going to go on the screens. And then we need to do user documentation, but we can also do programming at the same time. We know what the screens are going to look like. We can start to build that instruction manual even before there's software. Now, we won't be able to completely finish it, right? I mean, you're going to have screenshots probably, but those are concurrent. Testing, and then, so this user manual kind of is a little bit longer than the programming, an extra half a week. That's probably for the screenshot part. And then it feeds down into installation, skipping over the testing piece of the program. So we'll do something like this, and then I'll probably have you do it in an agile way for your project, just to kind of lay out, our scope is much smaller. You're going to have like 10 weeks to kind of boil it down. So some of this will be sort of simulated. The bottom is the network diagram. It's basically taking this and laying it out. This is also in Microsoft Project. I've done a lot of Gantt charts, but I don't remember ever doing one of these. But it's the same information. Requirements feeds into screen design. It feeds into report. It's just taking this and laying out the dependencies a little different. It has the start date. I mean, it's the same information, just a different view. So to compare the two, Gantt charts visually show the duration. That's the big difference here. If something is short versus long, you can see it. That's not here at all. So Gantt charts show the duration. Network diagrams show the dependencies. Now the Gantt charts kind of show the dependencies too, right? I mean, it's just more formal in the network diagram. Gantt charts show that overlap of time. Network diagrams, they both show that which can be done in parallel. And this is the books comparison. Visually, it shows slack time in a Gantt chart. The network diagram, they're kind of showing you'd go down and you'd enter stuff in here. These can be bigger. The slack time, though, comes in place of if one of these, there's not really slack time in here. If, say, screen design was going to take this long and report design was going to take this long, there'd be slack time for whoever was working on screen design until it fed into the database design. Those people would sort of be like, well, we're done. Database design, we can't start the database. We jump to help the report people, just slack time. How do you manage that? But what's that? Yeah, right. You go take your vacation time now. Forced vacation. So network diagramming is a critical path scheduling technique. So this idea of this critical path, if you're going to look at a software project and you have all these tasks, or any kind of project, I'm going to keep saying software because that's what I'm used to, but anything. That critical path is ultimately going to determine how long it takes. The parts that are dependent on each other and take the longest are going to be that determination. So, this network diagramming, you need to kind of have clear beginning and end points. And the Gantt chart holds true. What's the chance that screen design is over and you do database and you program and you never change the screen design? Low, right? So the more defined these are, the easier it is to fit them into the diagrams. Can be worked on independently of other tasks. So if things can be worked on independently, they're not all in the critical path. It's the big ones that have the dependency. When tasks have an order, serve the purpose of the project. So basically, the strength is to show how the completion times vary by activity, both on the networking diagram and the Gantt chart. I can drag one out if we say, really screen design is going to take an extra week. We'll rescale everything, and now you know the new deadline. If you can add some extra resources and shorten that, you can see how that affects it. So this Pine Valley furniture, back to that. So steps, identify each activity. So we collect the requirements. What do they want done? What's the screen design? So this is kind of back to the Gantt chart we were looking at. Screens and the reports, the database, user documentation, software programming, installation. So those are the activities that have to be done. And these are pretty typical. You're always going to have requirements. You're going to have some kind of design. I hope you have a database. That's kind of one requirement for your project that I will probably do is have to have some kind of database, even if it's a really light database. You could do a flat file storage, but it's such a pain. Rather than do a database. User documentation. Some design processes will actually design the user documentation before the programming, because then that determines kind of how it should look and what it should do. And then, of course, testing. So there's all these weird formulas for expected time. Microsoft project has this. Again, this is the more formal project. Requirements collection, we think will take between 1 and 9 weeks. And then it does this calculation. This is where it comes up with. It gives you best case, worst case, and then this formula. I'm not good with the Greek letters because they aren't supposed to be Greek, like a row. And, looks like an O and R and an E. Let's go with that. Maybe they are just O, R, and E. Yeah, just italicized O, R, and P. But basically, we're just scaling kind of, it's using this formula, but it's like
optimistic, realistic.
that's what it is. There you go. Yeah, that's right. Should have known that. I mean, all this with the formula, it's just the middle, the midpoint, right? On the realistic. But the formula is a little, no, they're all the midpoints. So I don't know why you have that crazy formula. So sequencing, so you identify the activities, you estimate the time, what's the order of these? And then what's the preceding activity? So screen design needs 1, report design needs 1, database needs 2 and 3. So you're just kind of laying these out. Here's the critical path. And this does look like a neural network diagram, if you've ever, or any kind of network diagram, but the collection feeds into the screen design, repeat feeds into the report design, these come back. So the critical path is to get from here to the end, which one is like the longest. So if this one's longer than this one, then this is the critical path. This is where you should concentrate on. Be the most worried about, I guess, would be the idea there. So commercial project management software, basically the idea, there's a ton of these. Like if you Google online project management software, you'll find them for all types of industries. I was doing this earlier. You'll find a lot of construction project management software. You'll find a lot of IT. You'll find a lot of software engineering pieces. But the basic idea is we need to be able to have start and end dates. We need to put tasks and how they're related, and then we need to have reports. So there's like I said, a million different ways to go about this, but they should do those 3 things. So summary, that's just what we talked about. So let's look real quick. And we'll spend more time on these as we go forward, but at the links I put in here. So Basecamp. This is the 37 signals one I was talking about. So I'm not even going to log in because we don't have a lot of time, but I've messed around some with Basecamp. It has a lot of stuff for communicating with your team. It has like kind of a discussion board, an instant messaging thing. It has some scheduling. Basecamp does not do Gantt. They go about it a different way. I'd like it if you guys just kind of maybe peek at these sometime this week, spend just a few minutes poking around. And I'm evaluating which of these, because I think it's easier if we all use the same for our project, which of these I'll have you lay it out in. Trello, so this is the Kanban one. So if you look at this, we have all these cards. Kanban uses stacks of cards. And we can move these around, reorder them. We have an activity feed over here, who's working on what. So drag and drop cards between lists to show progress. Add as many people. Trello is really open to support a lot of different things, but I've talked, again, in the past years, I've gone in and set things up on Trello multiple times and mess around because I hear so much great feedback about it. I just never had a good project. So here you can see, like, install pot rack over island. Like, you can use this for personal things, but a lot of software companies use this. What are the things to do that? Buy the pot rack, drill some holes in the wall, measure. You can assign the tasks to people. And they're showing a real simple example. Comments, activity. So that's Trello. This Wrike, I have looked at the least. I never heard of this until I was really poking around today trying to find what the most popular. This one came up multiple times. Big companies use it though. PayPal, Citrix, Hootsuite. It's another big company. I don't know what Pure Storage is. Oh, HTC. So this I haven't looked at. I think Wrike does support Gantt charts. I would like if you guys look at these, then give me feedback. Or if you find another one. These are just 4 I identified. Teamwork.com, again, I haven't used this. The first 2 I have, but this was a Gartner 2050 cool vendor. Didn't this one say it was a 2014 cool vendor? Again, now here, PayPal, that's the thing. It's a lot of these companies are so big, they have multiple projects. They probably use every piece of software that's out there. But this list is even more impressive than the Wrike one. This one, I believe, does have Kanban. These all accomplish the same idea in different ways. So just to kind of put these out here, and I'll be evaluating these. I found one that I thought looked good called Gantter, because I was trying to find one that we could look at that was really focused on Gantt. It looks good, but I don't know how you guys evaluate sites, but when I clicked on their news, the last news post was in 2013. So that automatically makes me think this is not actively being developed. A lot of software, once you develop software, you put it out online, there's no reason not to just leave it out there if people are paying for it. Have a very skeleton support crew and someone make sure the servers don't go down. When my business partner said he was going to shut down the company, when I said I was going to leave, I told him, well, that's dumb. Like, we're not profitable, but we're bringing in this revenue. Like, don't shut it down no matter what. Just keep it going and take that revenue and do something, like even if we went and got other jobs. But so I kind of feel like that's what's happened to this. So, but it does have those Gantt charts. And then Microsoft Project is kind of the old school. So add tasks with dates and timeline. I haven't used this in probably 7-8 years. So you give the name, the task a name, requirements, the duration, 3 days, what date are we going to start it? We'll start it Thursday. When is it going to finish? The predecessors, and then it'll lay out your Gantt chart. And then you can do all sorts of reports. You can put costs to it. It's actually really good software. I feel like I'm kind of talking down about it. I'm just, for these kind of things, using a desktop application like this, it seems poor. Like, then I'd have to use something else to manage my communication amongst the team. Why not do something where that's all together? So that's why I lean heavily towards these cloud-based ones. So, all right, that gets us pretty much there. My crazy here, so says no viewers, so I don't think we have to say goodbye. So, all right, bye if you're watching this on YouTube.